to John's Box, my YouTube channel, and to the politics of Swindon, the aftermath of the local elections in Swindon. Yes, the Borough of Swindon elections of 2023, where I'll be looking at the outcome of the elections, including statistics such as vote share for previous years, and finally to analyse Thursday's election. Finally, I will also look briefly at the national picture and share with you a very unusual outcome in one borough, actually only about an hour's drive away from Swindon, which I came across quite by accident. So, this year's election turned out to be a roaring success for Labour, as the party took all but 3 of the 19 seats up for grabs, and in doing so took control of the council, which it last held back in 1999. So, without further ado, let's look back at the stats and the outcome of my predictions, if you saw my first video, by the way. Is the number of seats won. I hope you can see that. You don't need to see my ugly mush. So, as I mentioned, Labour won all but 3 seats, 2 going to Conservatives, which they'd previously held, and 1 to the Liberal Democrats. They gained the vacant seat at Rawton. All the rest were Labour gains and Labour holds, which brings the total number of seats on the council to Labour having a clear lead over the Conservatives, and with the Liberal Democrats on 1, and also there's 1 independent, so that means that Labour have a majority of 8. Let's now look at the share of the vote. Now, I'm not going to compare this to 2019, I'm actually going to compare it to last year, because a lot of things have happened in the last year, and rather the results of 4 years ago don't really reflect, in my opinion, on the real picture. So let's have a look at this. Hope you can see it. So Labour picked up almost 30,000 votes with a 51.8% of the vote, which is almost 6 percentage points up on 2022. The Conservatives dropping down to almost 20,000 with a 34.6%, which is down by almost 8%. So clearly there's a swing towards Labour there. Liberal Democrats, they are the third party. They've increased their share of the vote slightly, although it's not such a good showing for them, because they put up candidates in all the seats, whereas last year they didn't have candidates in all the seats. The Greens probably did better on reflection, on 5%, so their share of the vote went up. And then we had the minor, the independents, actually it's not a party, it's an independent, and the TUSC, Trade Union Socialist something. Yep. So there you have the total vote share. I think if it were a general election, Labour would pick up, of course, both Swindon seats. Let's now look at my predictions. Yeah, I got it wrong. Well, I was a bit too cautious. Well, I predicted, well, forget about these numbers. These were not going to happen. Even my realistic prediction went wrong, apart from that one Liberal Democrat. And even that optimistic one, which I'd given Labour, was also well out. So let's have a look at it seat by seat. I predicted that Escott Ward would go to the Liberal Democrats based on a strong candidate. Well, they did get 1 seat, but it wasn't Escott, it was the one in Rawton that they picked up, but only by 20 votes. So it was a very narrow win, but they got it. They picked it up. The Conservatives held on surprisingly to Coveringham and Dorking, which I'd actually predicted, and Highworth and Blunsdon, which they won probably quite easily given the situation. I think with a little bit of luck they could have held on to one or two more, but it still wouldn't have changed the picture in that Labour would have still got an overall majority. So I was wrong. I predicted that Conservatives would have more seats there, and they lost 10 in actual fact, and Labour picked up 9 of them. The Liberal Democrats picked up the vacant seats there. So now to something of an unusual result in a place where you would never have expected it. In the borough of Slough, which went from Labour to no overall control, which isn't a party. But with the Conservatives having the most councillors. Now, isn't that a surprise? In Slough, that is a very safe Labour seat. On closer inspection, the reason was probably Labour's demise. The reason for Labour's demise was the fact that the council declared bankruptcy. It was a Labour-held council in 2021. So it proves how much local issues can come into play against the national picture, but not always, of course. Yep, people don't always take local issues into consideration, even in local election results. But the one in Slough proves that it has. In contrast, next door in the much posher borough, or rather Royal Borough of Windsor and Maidenhead, the Conservatives lost control to the Lib Dems, losing 15 of its seats. Now, what is interesting is that Slough has tripled the number of Conservative councillors to the Royal Borough. Yeah, let me show you the stats there. I know if you're a Swindonian, this might not be interesting, but if you're interested in the stats, etc., you see in Slough the Conservatives have 21 councillors, whereas in the Royal Borough it's only 7. Yep. Actually, there are no Labour councillors in the Royal Borough, but there are 22 Lib Dems, whereas in Slough there are 3. By the way, the Lib Dems did much better in Slough than they did in Swindon. There are 12 others, that's the Residents Association, Independents, and all sorts of other funny representatives. I don't mean funny in a bad way. So they say that football's a funny old game, or rather Ian Greaves used to say that, but politics too is a funny old game sometimes, isn't it? So it proves it's not all about class, or class, as Dennis Skinner once put it. There are all sorts of things, all sorts of reasons why people vote Conservative or not, and clearly there was a lot of tactical voting going on as well. So in summary, the next local elections are in May next year. The general elections will be held in 2024. Whether or not it will be before, on the day of the local elections, or after, nobody knows. It is probable that we'll see one more set of local election results before the general, I think. Both Swindon seats will be fiercely fought in the general and in the local, no doubt. And it's true, isn't a year is a long time in politics, not just 7 days, but a year is a humongous amount of time in politics. Election special, my election studio closes for another year at least, until the next elections are held. I hope you've enjoyed it, and don't forget to comment, especially if you're involved in the local elections, if you know a little bit more than me on the subject. I've always been interested in politics, and especially the stats and the opinion polls, etc. So yeah, write something in the comments.